The sound of gunfire echoed in the distance as Sophia Lawson clutched her leather satchel tighter to her chest. She was a fool to have taken the shortcut through Rattlesnake Pass, but the alternative would have added another day to her journey, and she was already behind schedule. Now, with her horse limping badly beneath her, and the sun beginning its descent behind the rugged Colorado mountains, the 22-year-old schoolteacher found herself in a predicament that could very well cost her life. "Easy, Maple," Sophia murmured, sliding from the saddle to inspect the mare's front left leg. The swelling was unmistakable, and when she touched the fetlock, the horse flinched and whinnied in pain. "I'm sorry, girl. I shouldn't have pushed you so hard." It was 1882, and the wilderness of Colorado was unforgiving. Sophia had been traveling to Victor, where she was to begin her position as the town's new schoolteacher. Her father had warned her against making the journey alone, but with him bedridden after an accident at the lumber mill and her mother tending to him, Sophia had no choice. The school board in Victor had been adamant arrive by month's end or forfeit the position. Sophia smoothed her skirts and adjusted her hat, trying to maintain composure despite the panic rising in her chest. The nearest town was at least 15 miles back, and Victor was still 20 miles ahead. With a lame horse and daylight fading, she was in serious trouble. She fumbled with the map in her satchel, trying to determine if there might be a homestead nearby where she could seek help. As she squinted at the worn paper, the rhythmic sound of approaching hoofbeats made her head snap up. A silhouette appeared on the horizon, backlit by the orange glow of the setting sun. Sophia's hand instinctively moved to the small Derringer pistol hidden in the pocket of her traveling coat. Her brother had insisted she carry it, though she'd never fired a gun in her life. As the rider drew closer, Sophia could make out a tall man on a magnificent black stallion. His wide-brimmed hat and the bandana around his neck marked him as a cowboy. Relief and apprehension warred within her. "Afternoon, madam," the man called out as he approached, tipping his hat. His voice was deep and smooth with a slight southern drawl. "Seems like you've run into some trouble." Sophia stood straighter, her hand still near her hidden weapon. "My horse has gone lame. I'm afraid I've pushed her too hard trying to reach Victor before nightfall." The cowboy swung down from his saddle with practiced ease, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the ground. He was taller than she'd first thought, with broad shoulders and a sun-weathered face that suggested he'd spent most of his life outdoors. His eyes, a startling shade of blue beneath the shadow of his hat, assessed her with frank curiosity. "Name's Kieran Ingram," he said, moving toward Maple with slow, deliberate steps. "Mind if I take a look at your horse, please?" Sophia replied, stepping back to give him room. "I'm Sophia Lawson. I'm the new schoolteacher for Victor." Kieran nodded, crouching to examine Maple's leg with gentle, expert hands. His stallion stood quietly nearby, not even tethered, so well-trained it stayed put without command. "Bad sprain," he concluded after a thorough inspection. "She won't be carrying anyone for at least a week, probably longer." He straightened, dusting off his hands on his worn denim pants. "You're lucky I came along when I did, Miss Lawson. These parts aren't safe for a woman alone, especially with night coming on." Sophia bit her lip, anxiety creeping back. "What am I to do? I must reach Victor by tomorrow." Kieran's gaze swept over the landscape, considering. Then he looked back at her, decision made. "Take my horse." "I beg your pardon, take midnight," he repeated, gesturing to his stallion. "I'll walk alongside and lead your mare. We can make it to Victor by tomorrow afternoon if we push on for another hour tonight and get an early start tomorrow." Sophia stared at him, dumbfounded. "You would give up your horse for a stranger and walk 20 miles. A hint of a smile touched Kieran's lips. I'm not giving him up, just lending him, and I've walked farther for less worthy causes, Miss Lawson. But why would you help me this way? Kieran shrugged, already beginning to transfer her saddle bags to his horse. Out here, we help each other. It's how folks survive. He paused, looking at her directly. Besides, Victor needs a schoolteacher. Can't have the town's children growing up ignorant because their teacher got stranded in the wilderness. Sophia wanted to protest further, but the darkening sky and the distant howl of a coyote made the decision for her. I'll pay you for your trouble, Mr. Ingram, once we reach town. He shook his head. No need for that. Now let's get you on midnight before we lose what light we have left. Kieran helped her mount his stallion, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The horse was taller than Maple, and Sophia felt momentarily unsteady before settling into the unfamiliar saddle. He's gentle as they come, Kieran assured her, adjusting the stirrups to better fit her shorter legs. Just give him a firm hand and he'll follow my lead. With that, they set off, Kieran walking briskly beside the horses, one hand holding Midnight's reins near the bit, the other guiding Maple, who limped along behind them. Sophia sat stiffly in the saddle, acutely aware of the cowboy's proximity and the unexpected turn her journey had taken. "Have you been in these parts long, Mr. Ingram?" she asked, feeling the need to break the silence that had fallen between them. "Call me Kieran," he replied, not breaking his stride. "And yes, most of my life. My father ran cattle up near Leadville, but I've been working different ranches these past few years, currently riding for the Bar K about 30 miles north of Victor. Are you a trail boss?" Sophia inquired, remembering the term from her brother's stories. Kieran chuckled. "No, madam, just a regular cowhand, though I do have a knack with horses, which is why the boss sends me out on these solo rides sometimes. What brings you to this area now?" "Delivering a message to the mine superintendent in Victor," he explained. "Not the kind of thing you trust to mail when there's money involved." As they talked, Sophia began to relax. Kieran's manner was direct but respectful, and he seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare without being condescending. The sun dipped below the horizon, and twilight descended rapidly. Just as Sophia was beginning to worry about traveling in full darkness, Kieran led them off the main trail toward a small clearing sheltered by a cluster of pine trees. "We'll make camp here," he announced. "There's a stream nearby for water, and the trees will give us some protection if the wind picks up." Sophia hesitated. "Camp? I've never. That is, I haven't prepared for." "Don't worry, Miss Lawson," Kieran said, helping her down from the saddle. "I've got provisions, and I've made camp enough times to ensure you'll be comfortable. Well, as comfortable as one can be under the circumstances." True to his word, Kieran efficiently set up a small camp. He built a fire, arranged bedrolls on opposite sides of it, and prepared a simple but satisfying meal of beans, jerky, and coffee. Throughout it all, he maintained a respectful distance, clearly aware of the impropriety of their situation and doing his best to preserve her dignity. As they sat by the fire eating from tin plates, Sophia studied her unexpected companion. In the firelight, she could see that beneath the trail dust, Kieran Ingram was a handsome man, perhaps in his late 20s. His features were strong and defined, his movements efficient and purposeful. There was an air of quiet competence about him that she found reassuring. "Tell me about yourself, Miss Lawson," Kieran said, breaking into her thoughts. "What brings a young lady like yourself to a rough mining town like Victor?" Sophia set down her plate. "Necessity, primarily. Teaching positions are scarce, and when I heard Victor needed a schoolteacher, I applied immediately. My father was injured in a sawmill accident 3 months ago, and our family needs the income. No husband to provide for you." The question was asked casually, but Sophia detected a note of genuine interest. "No," she replied, meeting his gaze across the fire. "I was engaged once to a banker's son back in Illinois, but he changed his mind when my father's accident left us in reduced circumstances." Kieran's expression hardened momentarily. "His loss," he said simply. They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing easily between them. Sophia learned that Kieran had lost his mother to influenza when he was 12, and his father had died in a cattle drive accident 5 years ago. He'd been on his own since then, working ranches across the territory, saving money with the hope of someday having his own piece of land. "Not a big spread," he clarified when she asked about his dreams. "Just enough for a decent herd and a good house, somewhere to put down roots." There was a wistfulness in his voice that tugged at Sophia's heart. Despite his capable exterior, she sensed a loneliness in Kieran Ingram that matched her own. As the fire burned low, Kieran stood and stretched. "You should get some rest, Miss Lawson. We'll need to start early if we're to reach Victor by tomorrow afternoon." Sophia nodded, suddenly aware of how tired she was. "Thank you, Mr. Ingram, Kieran, for everything." He tipped his hat with a small smile. "Sleep well, Miss Lawson." Sophia lay awake for some time after retiring to her bedroll, listening to the night sounds and occasionally glancing across the fire where Kieran's shadowy form lay still. She'd never spent a night outdoors, let alone in the company of a man she'd just met. Yet strangely, she felt safer than she had in months. Morning came with the soft glow of dawn and the aroma of fresh coffee. Sophia woke to find Kieran already up, tending to the horses and preparing a breakfast of hardtack and dried apples. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. "Better than I expected," she admitted, accepting the cup gratefully. The morning air was crisp, and she pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. They broke camp efficiently, with Sophia doing her best to help despite her inexperience. Within half an hour they were back on the trail. Sophia once again mounted on Midnight while Kieran walked beside them, leading Maple. The morning passed pleasantly as they traveled, the conversation picking up where it had left off the night before. Kieran pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the area, while Sophia told him about her teaching experiences and her love of literature. "Have you read much Whitman?" she asked, surprised when he nodded. "Leaves of Grass is one of the few books I own," he replied. "A schoolteacher in Leadville loaned it to me when I was 14, and I never returned it. Probably the only dishonorable thing I've done, but I couldn't part with those words." Sophia smiled, delighted to find a kindred spirit in this unexpected place. "My father would quote Song of Myself while working in his garden. My mother thought it scandalous, but I found it beautiful." "I contain multitudes," Kieran quoted softly, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected warmth. The terrain grew more challenging as they continued, forcing them to slow their pace. By midday, they had reached a steep ridge that overlooked a wide valley, with the scattered buildings of a small settlement visible in the distance. "Victor," Kieran announced, pointing. "We'll be there in a few hours." Sophia felt an odd pang of disappointment. Their journey was nearing its end, and soon she would part ways with this man who had so unexpectedly come to her aid. The thought left her strangely bereft. As they began their descent into the valley, dark clouds gathered on the horizon, and a cool wind picked up, bringing the scent of rain. "We need to hurry," Kieran said, glancing at the sky with concern. "That's a summer storm brewing, and they can turn nasty fast in these mountains." They quickened their pace as much as possible, but the storm moved faster. Within an hour, the first fat raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a steady downpour. Kieran pulled a slicker from his saddlebag and insisted Sophia wear it, leaving himself exposed to the elements. The trail, already treacherous, became slick with mud. Sophia clung to the saddle as Midnight carefully picked his way down the slope. Kieran stayed close, one hand on the bridle, the other steadying her when necessary. Suddenly, a jagged bolt of lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. Maple reared in panic, pulling free from Kieran's grip. The mare bolted a few yards before losing her footing on the muddy trail and going down hard, a terrified whinny piercing the air. Kieran rushed to the fallen horse, with Sophia close behind after quickly dismounting Midnight. Together, they knelt in the mud beside Maple, who was breathing heavily, her injured leg now bent at an unnatural angle. "She's broken it," Kieran said grimly, his face a mask of regret. "There's nothing we can do for her now, Miss Lawson." Sophia covered her mouth, tears mingling with the rain on her face. "No, there must be something. A splint, perhaps." Kieran shook his head, already drawing his revolver. "It would be cruel to prolong her suffering. This is the only kindness we can offer her now." Sophia turned away, unable to watch as Kieran put Maple down with a single shot. The sound echoed across the valley, momentarily louder than the storm. They stood in silence for a moment, the rain pelting down around them. Then Kieran gently took Sophia's arm. "We need to keep moving. There's a line shack about half a mile ahead where we can wait out the worst of this storm." Numb with cold and grief, Sophia allowed him to help her back onto Midnight. They continued down the trail, both soaked to the skin despite the slicker Sophia wore. The loss of Maple, a faithful companion who had carried her from Illinois to Colorado, weighed heavily on her heart. The line shack, when they reached it, was little more than a one-room cabin with a dirt floor and a small stone fireplace. But it was dry, and after Kieran had secured Midnight in the lean-to attached to the side, he set about building a fire while Sophia stood dripping and shivering by the door. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," Kieran said practically, not looking at her as he coaxed flames from the kindling. "I'll step outside while you change into something dry from your bags." Sophia nodded gratefully, though the prospect of changing in this primitive shelter with only a thin door between her and Kieran was daunting. Nevertheless, the chill that had settled into her bones left her little choice. Once the fire was crackling steadily, Kieran handed her the saddlebags he'd salvaged from Maple and stepped outside into the continuing downpour. Sophia quickly peeled off her sodden dress and petticoats, hanging them near the fire before donning her only spare outfit, a simple brown traveling dress that, while slightly damp, was infinitely better than what she'd been wearing. "You can come in now," she called, having done her best to arrange her wet hair into some semblance of propriety. Kieran entered, rain streaming from his hat and coat. His gaze swept over her, relief evident when he saw she was adequately clothed. "Better?" he asked, removing his dripping hat. "Much," she confirmed, "but now you must do the same. Your teeth are chattering." He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the suggestion. "I'll step outside," Sophia offered. "No need for you to get soaked again," Kieran replied. "Just turn your back if you would, Miss Lawson." Sophia complied, facing the fire and listening to the sounds of wet clothing being removed. Her cheeks burned despite the chill in the air, acutely aware of the impropriety of their situation. Yet what choice did they have? The storm showed no signs of abating, and hypothermia was a real danger. "Decent now," Kieran announced after a few minutes. Sophia turned to find him in dry trousers and a clean flannel shirt, his wet clothes hanging alongside hers near the fire. His dark hair was damp and curling slightly against his neck, and without his hat and coat, he looked younger, less the seasoned cowboy and more the young man he was. The storm's likely to last a while, he said, moving to the small window to peer out at the gray deluge. We might have to spend the night here. Sophia nodded, trying to ignore the flutter of nervousness in her stomach. One night in the open was already pushing the boundaries of propriety. A second night, this time in an enclosed cabin, would be scandalous if anyone were to find out. As if reading her thoughts, Kieran spoke softly. I give you my word as a gentleman, Miss Lawson. You have nothing to fear from me. I know that, Sophia replied quickly, meeting his gaze. You've been nothing but honorable since the moment we met. They fell into a comfortable silence, both warming themselves by the fire. Kieran produced a small pouch of coffee from his saddlebags and set water to boil in a battered pot he found on the cabin's single shelf. The rich aroma soon filled the small space, providing a welcome distraction from their predicament. As they sipped the hot coffee from tin cups, the wind outside intensified, rattling the cabin's single window. Kieran glanced at it with a frown. This storm's turning into a real gully washer, he observed. The trail to Victor will be washed out in places. Even if the rain stops by morning, travel will be difficult. Will we still be able to reach town tomorrow? Sophia asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. I'm already a day behind schedule and without Maple. We'll make it, Kieran assured her. Midnight can carry us both if necessary. It'll slow us down, but we'll get there. The thought of riding double with Kieran, her body pressed against his, sent an unexpected thrill through Sophia. She quickly suppressed it, focusing instead on practical matters. I should send word ahead to the school board, she mused, to explain my delay. There's a telegraph office in Victor, Kieran replied. You can wire them as soon as we arrive. They spent the afternoon talking, the conversation flowing as easily as it had the night before. Kieran told her more about his life as a cowboy, the long hours, the camaraderie with other hands, the rare moments of peace under a star-filled sky. In turn, Sophia shared stories of her teaching experiences, her dreams of someday opening her own school for girls, and her concern for her ailing father. He was so strong before the accident, she said softly, staring into the fire. It pains me to see him diminished, dependent on others for everything. Yet he raised a daughter strong enough to journey across half the country alone, Kieran observed. He must be proud of you. Sophia smiled at that. He encouraged me to take this position, even knowing how far away it would take me. Go west, Sophia, he told me. There's nothing but memories holding you here. Wise man, your father. As evening approached, the rain finally began to slacken, though the wind continued to howl around the cabin. Kieran prepared a simple meal from their remaining provisions, and they ate by firelight, their wet clothes now mostly dry and steaming slightly in the heat. With darkness came the challenge of sleeping arrangements. The cabin contained no furniture save for a small table and a single narrow cot with a thin straw mattress. You take the cot, Kieran said immediately. I'll make do on the floor. Sophia protested. After walking all day and getting soaked to the skin. No, I couldn't possibly accept. The floor will suit me fine. Miss Lawson, Kieran said firmly, I've slept on the ground more nights than I can count. One more won't harm me. In the end, Sophia reluctantly agreed, though she insisted on giving him one of the blankets from her saddlebags. As she settled onto the cot and Kieran spread his bedroll on the dirt floor across the room, the intimacy of their situation struck her anew. Kieran, she said softly, using his first name without the formality of Mr. Ingram for the first time. Thank you, not just for the cot, but for everything. I don't know what would have happened to me if you hadn't come along when you did. In the firelight, she saw his expression soften. You're welcome, Sophia, he replied, her name sounding different, special somehow in his deep voice. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded Sophia. She lay awake, listening to the storm gradually subsiding and the occasional pop from the dying fire. Across the room, Kieran's breathing had settled into the steady rhythm of sleep. She found herself studying him in the dim light, the strong line of his jaw relaxed in slumber, one arm thrown above his head, his broad chest rising and falling steadily. In just 2 days, this man had gone from stranger to what? Not quite a friend, but something more than a chance acquaintance. With that confusing thought, Sophia finally drifted into sleep, the sound of the rain pattering on the roof providing a soothing lullaby. Morning brought clear skies and the sweet scent of pine washed clean by the storm. Sophia woke to find Kieran already outside, tending to midnight and assessing the condition of the trail ahead. "The path's muddy but passable," he reported when she joined him outside, her hair neatly braided and her still damp boots back on her feet. "If we leave within the hour, we should reach Victor by early afternoon." They shared a breakfast of the last of their provisions, then packed up their belongings. Before leaving the cabin, Kieran built up the fire and left a small pile of dry wood beside it. "For the next traveler who might need shelter," he explained when Sophia questioned him. "It's an unwritten code out here, leave a place better than you found it." It was a philosophy that spoke to Kieran's character, Sophia thought as they set out. He was a man of quiet principle, who helped others not for recognition or reward, but because it was the right thing to do. As Kieran had predicted, the trail was treacherous in places, with mudslides and washed-out sections that required careful navigation. They made slower progress than anticipated, with Sophia still riding midnight and Kieran walking alongside, occasionally taking the reins when the footing became particularly dangerous. By mid-morning, it was clear that their pace was too slow to reach Victor by afternoon. After Kieran nearly lost his footing for the 3rd time in as many miles, Sophia made a decision. "This is ridiculous," she declared, drawing midnight to a halt. "We'll never reach town at this rate and you're going to break your neck in this mud. We should ride double, as you suggested yesterday." Kieran looked up at her, surprise evident on his face. "Are you certain? It would be rather intimate." "I'm certain that I don't want to be responsible for you injuring yourself on my account," Sophia replied firmly, though her cheeks colored slightly. "Besides, propriety seems a luxury we can ill afford given the circumstances." After a moment's hesitation, Kieran nodded. "Very well, but I should ride in front. I know this horse better, and it'll be easier to control him from that position." He mounted midnight with practiced ease, then reached down to help Sophia up behind him. She settled awkwardly on the horse's rump, uncertain where to place her hands. "You'll need to hold on to me," Kieran said over his shoulder, his voice carefully neutral. "Otherwise you'll slide off at the first incline." Taking a deep breath, Sophia placed her hands lightly on Kieran's waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. As midnight began to move, the motion pushed her closer, until she was pressed against Kieran's back, her arms tightening around him by necessity. They rode in silence for some time, both acutely aware of their physical proximity. For Sophia, the experience was both uncomfortable and exhilarating. She'd never been this close to a man before, not even her former fiancé, whose embraces had been brief and formal. The solid strength of Kieran's body against hers, the rhythm of his breathing, the faint scent of leather and pine that clung to him, it all combined to create a heady awareness that made her simultaneously want to pull away and draw closer. As the miles passed, however, necessity overcame awkwardness. The terrain demanded their attention, and conversation gradually resumed, albeit more sporadic than before. By the time the town of Victor came into view in the early afternoon, a degree of comfort had been established between them. Victor was a typical mining town, with a main street dominated by saloons, a general store, and various businesses catering to miners and the families that had followed them to this remote outpost. The buildings were a mix of rough-hewn logs and more refined clapboard structures, with boardwalks raised above the muddy street. As they rode into town, Sophia became painfully aware of the picture they presented, her arms around Kieran, both of them somewhat disheveled from their journey. Several townsfolk stopped to stare, and she could practically see the gossip beginning to spread. "Where should I take you?" Kieran asked, seemingly oblivious to the attention they were attracting. "The schoolhouse, please," Sophia replied, trying to sit more formally despite their awkward seating arrangement. "The school board chairman, Mr. Henderson, was supposed to meet me there upon my arrival." Kieran guided Midnight down the main street, past curious onlookers, until they reached a small white building set slightly apart from the others. A bell hung from a framework above the roof, and a flagpole stood in the yard, though no flag flew at present. A middle-aged man in a dark suit was pacing in front of the building. He stopped abruptly when he saw them approach, his expression a mixture of relief and disapproval. "Miss Lawson, I presume?" he called as Kieran brought Midnight to a halt. "Yes, Mr. Henderson," Sophia replied, sliding down from the horse with as much dignity as she could muster. "I apologize for my delayed arrival. There were complications on the journey." Kieran dismounted beside her, standing respectfully to one side as Mr. Henderson approached. "So I see," the chairman said dryly, his gaze moving critically between them. "We expected you yesterday, Miss Lawson. The school board was most concerned. My horse went lame in Rattlesnake Pass," Sophia explained. "Mr. Ingram here was kind enough to offer assistance." "Without him, I wouldn't have made it at all." Mr. Henderson's expression softened slightly. "Well, you're here now, and that's what matters, though I must say riding into town in such a fashion was necessary due to the condition of the trail after the storm," Kieran interjected, his tone polite but firm. "Miss Lawson has conducted herself with perfect propriety throughout our journey, sir. Any suggestion otherwise would be a disservice to her character." The chairman had the grace to look abashed. Of course. No offense intended." He turned to Sophia. "We've prepared the teacher's quarters for you. It's a small apartment at the back of the schoolhouse. I'll show you there now if you're ready." Sophia nodded, then turned to Kieran, suddenly reluctant to part ways. "I cannot thank you enough for your help, Mr. Ingram." Kieran tipped his hat, his blue eyes meeting hers with a warmth that belied his formal words. "It was my pleasure, Miss Lawson. I wish you all success in your new position." "Will you? That is, are you staying in town?" Sophia asked, aware of Mr. Henderson watching their exchange with interest. "For a day or two," Kieran replied. "I need to deliver my message to the mine superintendent, and Midnight could use a proper rest before the return journey to the Bar K. Perhaps I could buy you dinner this evening as a small token of my gratitude." The words were out before Sophia could consider their propriety, and she felt her cheeks flush. Kieran looked surprised, but pleasantly so. "That would be very kind, Miss Lawson." "The hotel restaurant at 7 then?" "I'll be there," he promised, before turning to Mount Midnight once more. With a final tip of his hat to both Sophia and Mr. Henderson, he rode off toward the livery stable at the end of the street. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. "Well, Miss Lawson, shall we?" As the chairman led her to her new quarters, discussing school matters and introducing her to townspeople they passed, Sophia found her thoughts repeatedly straying to Kieran Ingram and their dinner engagement that evening. The teacher's quarters were small but comfortable: a bedroom, a sitting room with a small stove, and a private entrance at the back of the schoolhouse. After Mr. Henderson left, promising to return in the morning to help her prepare for classes, Sophia unpacked her few belongings and washed away the grime of the journey. As she prepared for dinner, selecting her best dress, a navy blue wool with modest lace trim, Sophia contemplated her unusual reaction to Kieran. In just 2 days, this stranger had come to occupy her thoughts in a way no man ever had, not even Thomas, her former fiancé. There was something about Kieran's quiet strength, his inherent decency, that appealed to her on a fundamental level. The hotel restaurant was the most refined establishment in Victor, which wasn't saying much by Eastern standards. Still, the tables were covered with clean cloths, the silverware polished, and the menu offered more than the standard fare of beans and beef found in most Western eateries. Kieran was waiting when she arrived, looking transformed from the trail-worn cowboy she'd journeyed with. He'd bathed and shaved, his dark hair neatly combed, wearing clean trousers and a white shirt with a string tie. He stood as she approached, his eyes widening slightly as he took in her appearance. "Miss Lawson," he greeted her, pulling out her chair. "You look very nice." "As do you, Mr. Ingram," she replied, settling into her seat. "And please call me Sophia. After what we've been through together, formality seems unnecessary." "Sophia, then," he agreed with a smile that softened his features. "And I'm still Kieran to you." Dinner was a more relaxed affair than Sophia had anticipated. Away from the dangers of the trail and the impropriety of their forced proximity, they discovered a natural ease in each other's company. Kieran asked about her initial impressions of Victor and the schoolhouse, while Sophia inquired about his meeting with the mine superintendent. "It went well," Kieran told her. "The payment for the cattle was fair, and the boss will be pleased. I'll be heading back to the bar day after tomorrow." Sophia felt an unexpected pang at his words. "So soon? Ranch work doesn't wait," he replied with a slight shrug. "Cattle need tending regardless of a cowboy's personal plans." "Of course," Sophia nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "It's just, I had hoped perhaps to show you the schoolhouse once I've settled in, to properly thank you for all your help." Kieran studied her for a moment, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "I could delay a day, I suppose. The boss isn't expecting me back until the end of the week." Sophia smiled, unreasonably pleased. "Then I shall expect you for a tour tomorrow afternoon if that's convenient." "It is," he confirmed, returning her smile. As they finished their meal and parted for the evening, Kieran walking her back to the schoolhouse, despite her assurances that it wasn't necessary, Sophia found herself wondering at the strange turn her life had taken. 2 days ago, she had been terrified and alone on the trail. Now she was safely in Victor, anticipating another meeting with a man who intrigued her more than anyone she'd ever known. The following day was filled with preparations for the start of the school term. Mr. Henderson introduced Sophia to the other school board members, showed her the curriculum materials, and helped her organize the classroom. By afternoon, she was beginning to feel more settled, though the loss of Maple still weighed on her heart. True to his word, Kieran arrived at the schoolhouse just after 3 o'clock. Sophia found herself smoothing her hair and straightening her collar before opening the door to his knock. "Right on time," she greeted him with a smile. Kieran removed his hat as he stepped inside. "A trait my father instilled in me. He always said that punctuality was a form of respect." "Your father sounds like a wise man," Sophia observed, leading him into the classroom. "This is where I'll be teaching. 27 students ages 6 to 16, all in this one room." A challenge, Kieran commented, looking around at the rows of desks and the large blackboard at the front of the room. But a welcome one, Sophia replied. I've always believed that education is the greatest gift we can give a child, especially in these remote areas where opportunities are limited. They continued the tour, with Sophia showing him the small library of donated books, her living quarters, and the playground area behind the school. Throughout, Kieran asked thoughtful questions that revealed a genuine interest in her work. You care deeply about teaching, he observed as they sat on a bench in the schoolyard, the late afternoon sun warming the air around them. I do, Sophia acknowledged. It's more than a job to me. It's a calling, I suppose, though that sounds rather grand. Not at all, Kieran replied. Everyone should have something they feel that way about. And for you, it's ranching, Sophia asked. Kieran considered this. Working with horses primarily. There's something about the connection between man and horse that feels right to me, pure in a way that little else is. The conversation flowed easily between them, touching on books they'd read, places they'd been, dreams they harbored. Before either realized it, the sun was beginning to set. I should go, Kieran said reluctantly, rising from the bench. You must have more preparations to make for your classes. Will I see you again before you leave? Sophia asked, unable to keep the hope from her voice. Kieran hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. Perhaps breakfast tomorrow. Before I head back to the ranch. I'd enjoy that very much, Sophia agreed. As they walked back to the front of the schoolhouse, an uncomfortable awareness settled over Sophia. This would likely be their last evening together. Tomorrow, Kieran would ride back to the bar K, and their brief connection would end. The thought left an unexpected emptiness in her chest. At the door, they faced each other awkwardly, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Thank you for the tour, Kieran said finally. I can see why you're passionate about teaching. This is a good place for you. And the bar K is a good place for you, Sophia asked. Kieran shrugged. It's a job, a good one with fair pay and decent men, but it's not mine, not the way this schoolhouse is yours. Your own ranch, then. That's still the dream. It is, he confirmed. Though sometimes dreams take longer to realize than we hope. On impulse, Sophia reached out and touched his arm. I believe you'll achieve yours, Kieran. You're the kind of man who sees things through. The warmth in his eyes at her words made Sophia's heart quicken. For a moment, she thought he might take her hand or perhaps even embrace her. Instead, he simply nodded, his expression softening. Until tomorrow, then, he said, stepping back and placing his hat on his head. Until tomorrow, Sophia echoed. That night, as she prepared her first lessons, Sophia found her thoughts continually straying to Kieran. She tried to rationalize her feelings. They had shared an intense experience, and it was natural to feel a connection under such circumstances. Once he left, and her teaching duties began in earnest, this strange attachment would fade. Yet even as she told herself this, Sophia knew it wasn't entirely true. Something about Kieran Ingram had touched her in a way that went beyond gratitude or the heightened emotions of their journey. In just 3 days, he had come to mean something to her, something she wasn't quite ready to name. Breakfast the next morning was a bittersweet affair. They met at the hotel restaurant again, both trying to keep the conversation light despite the knowledge that Kieran would be leaving directly afterward. Will you write? Sophia asked as they lingered over coffee. To let me know you made it back safely. Kieran seemed surprised by the request but nodded. If you'd like me to. I would, she confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. Very much. Something shifted in Kieran's expression, a subtle change that Sophia might have missed if she hadn't been watching him so intently. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. Sophia, But whatever he was about to say was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Henderson at their table. "Miss Lawson." "Good morning," the chairman greeted her, nodding politely to Kieran. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to inform you that we've scheduled a welcome reception for you this Sunday after church. The parents are eager to meet their children's new teacher." "That's very kind, Mr. Henderson," Sophia replied, trying not to show her frustration at the interruption. "I look forward to it." After a few more minutes of conversation about school matters, during which Kieran sat quietly sipping his coffee, Mr. Henderson finally took his leave. By then, the moment had passed, and Kieran was checking his pocket watch. "I should be going," he said, signaling for the check. "It's a long ride back to the bar K." Outside the hotel, Midnight was already saddled and waiting, Kieran's few possessions secured to the saddle. The finality of the moment struck Sophia with unexpected force. "Safe travels, Kieran," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He studied her face for a long moment as if memorizing her features. "Thank you, Sophia, for dinner and breakfast and for giving me something to think about on the ride home." Before she could ask what he meant, Kieran surprised her by taking her hand and raising it to his lips in a gesture more suited to an Eastern gentleman than a Western cowboy. The brief touch of his lips on her skin sent a shiver through Sophia that had nothing to do with the morning chill. "All right," he promised, releasing her hand and mounting Midnight in one fluid motion. Sophia stood on the boardwalk, watching as Kieran rode down the main street of Victor and disappeared around a bend in the road. Only when he was completely out of sight did she turn and head back to the schoolhouse, a curious mix of emotions churning within her. The days that followed were filled with activity, as Sophia began teaching her diverse group of students. The children of Victor were a mix of miners' offspring, ranchers' kids, and the sons and daughters of the various merchants and professionals who served the community. Many had received only sporadic education before, and Sophia found herself challenged to meet their varying needs. Yet despite the demands of her new position, thoughts of Kieran frequently intruded. She found herself looking forward to the mail delivery each day, hoping for the promised letter. When 2 weeks passed with no word, Sophia tried to quell her disappointment. Perhaps he'd been too busy with ranch duties, or maybe he'd simply changed his mind about maintaining contact. It was nearly 3 weeks after Kieran's departure when the first letter arrived, a somewhat crumpled envelope addressed in a strong, if unpracticed, hand. Sophia's heart leapt when she saw it, and she retreated to her quarters to read it in private. Kieran's letter was straightforward and unadorned, much like the man himself. He apologized for the delay, explaining that he'd been sent to help with a cattle drive immediately upon his return to the Bar K. He described the work on the ranch, asked about her students, and concluded with a tentative inquiry about whether she might welcome further correspondence. Sophia sat down immediately to compose a reply, her pen flying across the paper as she told him about her first weeks of teaching, the challenges and rewards, and the gradual acceptance she was finding in the community of Victor. She ended with a clear affirmation that she would indeed welcome his letters, adding that they brought a touch of the outside world to her somewhat isolated position. Thus began a correspondence that continued through the fall and into early winter. Their letters grew longer and more personal as the weeks passed, with Kieran revealing more of his hopes for the future, and Sophia sharing her thoughts on everything from literature to the politics of the school board. In November, Sophia mentioned in passing that she would be spending Thanksgiving alone, as travel to Illinois to visit her family was impossible given the distance and her teaching schedule. A week later, to her astonishment, Kieran arrived in Victor. "I had some time off," he he explained when she opened the schoolhouse door to find him standing there, hat in hand. And no one should spend Thanksgiving alone. He stayed for 3 days, during which they shared meals, took walks around the town, and talked for hours. Sophia introduced him to her students during a special Friday session, and Kieran charmed them all with stories of ranch life and a demonstration of rope tricks in the schoolyard. On the evening before he was to leave, they sat before the fire in Sophia's small sitting room, the conversation turning inevitably to his departure. "When will you be back?" Sophia asked, no longer pretending that his visits weren't important to her. Kieran's gaze was steady as he looked at her across the small space. "Christmas, if you'll have me. I've arranged for a week's leave." "A week," Sophia repeated, pleasure warming her voice. "That would be wonderful." Something in her tone must have conveyed more than her words, for Kieran leaned forward, his expression serious. "Sophia, I need to be clear about something. These visits, our letters, they mean a great deal to me, more than I can properly express." Sophia's heart quickened. "They mean a great deal to me as well. The distance between us makes this complicated," Kieran continued. "And I have nothing to offer you, yet no home of my own, no security beyond my wages." "I'm not asking for anything, Kieran," Sophia replied softly. He smiled then, a rare full smile that transformed his features. "Not yet, perhaps, but I want you to know that I'm working towards something, that these visits are not idle pastimes for me." The implications of his words hung in the air between them, neither quite ready to name what was growing between them, yet both acknowledging its significance. True to his word, Kieran returned for Christmas, bringing with him a small pine tree that they decorated with paper ornaments made by Sophia's students. On Christmas Eve, after attending the community service at the small church in Victor, they exchanged simple gifts: a hand-tooled leather bookmark from Kieran to Sophia, and a knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes from her to him. That evening, standing in the gently falling snow outside the schoolhouse, Kieran finally kissed her, a soft, tentative touch of his lips to hers that quickly deepened when Sophia responded with unexpected fervor. It was her first real kiss, nothing like the dry pecks her former fiancé had bestowed, and it left her breathless and flushed despite the cold. When they parted, Kieran's expression was a mixture of wonder and determination. "I'll be back in spring," he promised. "With news, I hope." Their letters continued through the bitter months of January and February, each sharing the daily events of their lives while carefully nurturing the tender feelings that had taken root between them. Sophia wrote of a particularly difficult student who had finally shown progress, of the blizzard that had kept the town isolated for a week, of her growing acceptance in the community. Kieran described the harsh winter on the ranch, the loss of several cattle to the cold, and his increasing responsibilities as the foreman came to trust his judgment. In late March, Kieran's letters began to hint at some development in his circumstances, though he was frustratingly vague about the details. "Things are changing here," he wrote. "For the better, I believe. I'll tell you everything when I see you next." April brought the first real thaw, and with it, Kieran's promised visit. Sophia was in the classroom, helping a young student with his letters, when she heard the now familiar sound of midnight's hoofbeats outside the schoolhouse. Excusing herself, she hurried to the window just as Kieran dismounted, looking up at the building with a smile as if he sensed her watching. Their reunion was constrained by the presence of the children, but the warmth in Kieran's eyes as he greeted her spoke volumes. He sat quietly at the back of the classroom until the school day ended, then helped Sophia clear away the day's materials as the last students departed. "You've grown even prettier since Christmas," he said when they were finally alone, drawing her into his arms for a kiss that made up for months of separation. When they parted, both somewhat breathless, Sophia studied his face. "And you look different somehow, more settled." Kieran nodded, taking her hand and leading her to the teacher's desk where they sat facing each other. "I have news, Sophia. Important news." "Tell me," she encouraged, noting the suppressed excitement in his manner. "I've bought land," he announced. 200 acres along the Creek River, about 15 miles from here. Good grazing land with a spring and enough timber for building. Sophia's eyes widened. "Your own ranch, Kieran, that's wonderful, but how?" "The cattle drive last fall I saved every penny of my wages. And then this winter, I helped the mine superintendent set up a new accounting system. He paid me well for the work." Kieran's expression turned sheepish. "I never told you, but I studied bookkeeping before my father died. It finally came in useful." "I'm so happy for you," Sophia said sincerely, squeezing his hands. "This is your dream coming true." "Part of it," Kieran replied, his gaze intent. "The land is just the beginning, Sophia. I've resigned from the Bar K, effective next month. I'll be moving to my property to start building a house and acquiring a small herd." "So soon?" Sophia felt a flutter of both excitement and anxiety. "You'll be living just 15 miles from here." "That's right," Kieran confirmed. "Close enough to visit more often, far enough that people won't gossip too much about the schoolteacher receiving regular calls from the new rancher." Sophia laughed at that, but then sobered as she considered the implications. "This changes things between us, doesn't it?" "It can," Kieran said carefully, "if that's what you want." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Sophia took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would set their course. "It is what I want," she said firmly. "I care for you, Kieran. More than I ever thought possible when we first met on that trail." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I love you, Sophia Lawson," he said simply. "Have since that first night by the campfire, I think, though it took me some time to recognize it." "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling both monumental and completely natural. Kieran pulled her close, his kiss conveying all the emotion that words couldn't express. When they finally separated, he rested his forehead against hers. "I won't ask for promises yet. Not until I have something real to offer you. The house needs building, the herd establishing. But know that everything I do is with a future in mind, our future, if you'll have me." "I'll have you," Sophia assured him, her heart full. "And I'll wait as long as necessary." The following months brought significant changes for both of them. Kieran moved to his land in May, living initially in a tent while he constructed a small but sturdy cabin with the help of a few friends from the Bar K. Sophia finished the school year and accepted a renewal of her contract, secretly thrilled that she would be staying in Victor, close to Kieran as he built his ranch. Throughout the summer and fall, they saw each other weekly, Kieran riding to Victor for Sunday services and often staying for dinner afterward, or Sophia making the journey to his property on school holidays, properly chaperoned by one of the older women from town to maintain appearances. By Christmas, Kieran's cabin was complete, with 2 rooms and a front porch that offered a view of the mountains. He had acquired a small herd of 30 cattle and 2 additional horses to help with the work. It was a modest start, but the foundation of something solid and promising. On Christmas Eve, after the service at the Victor Church, Kieran asked Sophia to walk with him through the snow-covered town. They stopped at the spot where they had shared their first kiss exactly 1 year before. "I have something for you," Kieran said, reaching into his pocket and producing a small box. "It's not much, but it's everything I am." Inside the box was a simple gold ring with a small sapphire. "It was my mother's," Kieran explained. The only thing of value my father kept when times were hard." Sophia looked up at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "It's beautiful." Kieran took her gloved hand in his. "Sophia Lawson, this past year has been the happiest of my life, despite the distance and the waiting. I love you more than I ever thought possible, and I want to spend the rest of my days with you by my side. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Sophia answered without hesitation. "With all my heart, yes." They were married in the spring of 1884, in the small church of Victor, with Sophia's parents traveling from Illinois for the occasion, and Kieran's former ranch hands serving as groomsmen. The entire town turned out for the celebration, many having watched their courtship unfold with interest and approval. After a brief honeymoon in Denver, they returned to Kieran's, now their ranch, which he had named Midnight's Rest in honor of the horse that had brought them together. Sophia continued teaching until the end of the school year, making the daily ride to and from Victor with a joy that made the journey seem short. As the years passed, their love deepened and their ranch prospered. Sophia established a small school on their property, teaching not only their own children, 2 sons and a daughter, but also the children of neighboring ranchers. Kieran's herd grew to several hundred head, and his reputation for fair dealing and fine horses spread throughout the territory. On the 10th anniversary of their first meeting, Kieran surprised Sophia with a special gift, a new mare, coal black with a single white star on her forehead, reminiscent of Midnight, who had grown old but still enjoyed a place of honor in their stable. "For the schoolteacher who stole my heart when her horse went lame," he said, presenting the reins to his wife. Sophia, her beauty matured but undiminished by the years, smiled up at the man who had walked beside her on that fateful journey and every day since. "I think I got the better end of that bargain, Cowboy." "I don't know about that," Kieran replied, gathering her into his arms for a kiss that held all the passion of their first embraces and the comfortable certainty of their years together. "Seems to me we both won something pretty special when your horse went lame in Rattlesnake Pass." As they stood together in the golden light of the setting Colorado sun, surrounded by the home and family they had built together, both silently acknowledged the truth of his words. Their journey had begun with an act of kindness on a dangerous trail, but it had led them to a love that would endure for all their days. In the years that followed, the Ingram Ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Kieran's expertise with horses led to a profitable sideline in breeding and training, while Sophia's small school gained a reputation for excellence that drew students from as far as Denver. Their children grew strong and capable under their guidance. James, the eldest, showing his father's way with horses; Thomas, the thoughtful middle child, inheriting his mother's love of books and learning; and Emma, the youngest, combining both parents' determination with a spirit entirely her own. The story of how they met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. "Your father gave me his horse and walked 20 miles beside me," Sophia would tell the children. "That's how I knew he was a man worth keeping. And your mother faced danger with more courage than most men I've known," Kieran would add. "That's how I knew she was a woman worth walking those 20 miles for." In 1912, 30 years after their first meeting, Kieran and Sophia stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching as automobiles began to replace horses on the roads leading to Victor. The West was changing, becoming less wild with each passing year, but their love remained as steadfast as the mountains that framed their view. "You ever regret it?" Kieran asked, his arm around his wife's still slender waist. "Staying here instead of returning east? You could have had a different life." Sophia looked up at him, the years having etched lines around her eyes but done nothing to dim the warmth in their depths. "Not for a single moment," she replied. "Everything I ever wanted, I found right here with the cowboy who gave me his horse and walked beside me." And as they watched the sun set on another day in the land they both loved, Sophia and Kieran knew with absolute certainty that some journeys, once begun, lead exactly where they're meant to, no matter how unlikely their starting point might seem.